Good afternoon. Good to see we have a lot of our regular people here again, maybe a couple of few new people here. So if you are new to these sessions, good afternoon and welcome. Thanks for joining. I'm Caws. I run a company called Adventures in Movement. And these Friday sessions came about, I always mention this, they came about through lockdown. Because it was something to do, get my colleagues, get my friends together, chatting, learning a little bit more about them and sharing their stories with clients, with friends and people. And today, I'm going to be chatting to Karima Jam, who I met again at the beginning of lockdown, or maybe halfway through lockdown, when we did some oxygen advantage instructor training together. And then we actually met in person just at the beginning of this, May time this year at the Health Optimization Summit. And it was like, right, let's get her on a Friday session. Let's have a little chat to Karima. She's got a fantastic story. She teaches Wim Hof method, oxygen advantage, breathology. She's just climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. So we're going to find out a little bit about that, how she did that, how she used her breathing techniques to help to do that. She works with the UN for the past 20 years. She teaches in Russian, in French, in Spanish, in English. So we've got plenty of things to chat about. Karima, thank you for joining. Thank you for agreeing to chat to us this afternoon, and welcome. Good to see you.
Hi, Gray. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure and an honor to be here today. And thank you very much for inviting. Good afternoon, everyone. Lovely to see you all. And thank you so much for your interest. I'm equally as thrilled to be here today because I've also watched and followed your lunch and learns. And I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you.
We were just saying, wasn't it? Was it 2021? It was beginning of 2021 when you did the Oxygen Advantage instructor training.
Yeah.
Let's give me a little bit more information about your background, because you're living now in Switzerland, in Geneva, but you were born in Kazakhstan.
Yeah. Well, technically, I was born in the Soviet Union in 1980. It was still Soviet Union, and of course, then it became Kazakhstan became independent in 91. So I am originally I'm an ethnic by ethnicity. So my ethnicity tells me that I should be speaking Kazakh, but because of the Soviet Union heritage, I actually grew up speaking Russian, and still consider Russian as my native language. But for the past 15 years, I've been living in Switzerland. Before moving to Switzerland, I lived in Colombia. This is where I learned Spanish. And now with the 15 years living in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, I'm also very much integrated here now. I'm Swiss also by passport. So it's a kind of a big mix-up of everything. And I'm married to a Spaniard as well. So there you go.
So that's useful, speaking Spanish.
Yeah.
And so your journey into breath work, because from a work point of view, you've been working with the UN. A little bit of information about the work that perhaps you've been doing over did you say 20 years you've been doing that type of work?
Yeah.
Like an international development.
Exactly. So I started my career in international development and human rights. And now, it's exactly to this day, more or less, it's about 20 years, it's exactly 20 years to this day.
Oh, wow.
When I came back from doing my master's degree in gender studies in the Central European University in Budapest. So I went back to Almaty, and I got a small project to work in the UNIFEM. At that time, it was called UNIFEM. Now it's UN Women. Then I worked in some other NGOs doing some kind of educational exchanges. I worked in the International Organization for Migration in Almaty. Then I dropped everything, left everything, and took all my savings and went to Colombia. I was only 25. I felt like I need some crazy change in my life, and I want to finally learn Spanish, because living in Kazakhstan to learn Spanish wasn't as easy at that time. So I moved to Colombia. I spent there about a year. Of course, I learned Spanish, and this is actually where was my first exposure into breath work as is. It was a difficult time for me in Colombia because I was young. Although I had experience living abroad, it was kind of tougher, even though I had some friends. I already spoke Spanish fluently. It was not an easy time, and I kind of felt a period that was very depressive. So a friend of mine, she said, "Hey, why don't you come over and we will breathe together and see if it helps?" And she did some sort of a variety of, that rebirthing kind of holotropic type of breath work. Although she didn't call it that way. She just said, well, I'll just do some breathing. And this was my first exposure in 2000, late 2015 or 16, I think. And I was quite mind blown at what it gave me. It was a very interesting experience into understanding what was going on with me. It wasn't at all into functional breathing. It was really that hyperventilation where you breathe like that for an extended period of time, where your nose is hurting and you feel awful. You're like, oh my God, it's just so uncomfortable and painful. But she says, just keep going. But then that's what you get with that kind of alternate state of consciousness, that type of breath work. And then I didn't really follow that, but I was always, I think, all my life interested in some kind of healing and in healthy lifestyles. I was always very attracted by that. And then when I already moved to Switzerland around the age of 30, I went really dived head in with all kinds of healthy lifestyle and stuff. And I think the first time I heard about Wim Hof was also during a podcast with Tim Ferriss in 2016. And that immediately also rang a bell for me, because in the Soviet Union, there was the man called Porfiry Ivanov. He's kind of a Russian Wim Hof. He was a Russian Wim Hof at that time. And in around mid-80s, there was a lot of like the television exposure, and he was a bit controversial as well, how he would just go out in the snow and walk barefoot and then just pour ice water on him and talk about how it's important to be connected with nature. And there were also videos of children walking around in their undies and just playing with the snow. So that's what, when I was 6 or 7 years old, that really made an impact on me. And so when I heard about Wim Hof, I immediately thought about Porfiry Ivanov at that time, because of course, when I was little, my parents, there was no question about me doing the same. So it was just really only an impression that it left, and I didn't practice it. So I kind of tried doing Wim Hof, but it didn't really click after listening to it. So it wasn't until 2017 when I decided to enroll and buy a course, an online course with Wim Hof method. And after 1 week, I was sold. I not only sold in the sense that I believed in the method, I wanted to teach it. So of course, that at that time was just about cold, but then it was also about breath. It was also about seeing how breath affects your physiology, how breath is something that we take for granted, but it is such a powerful tool. I think, as you know, you've also had some of my fellow instructors coming into your show who we were in the same cohort, like Heather, for example. So when most Wim Hof instructors, if they have never been exposed to breathwork before, they kind of they start going further. Many of them go into oxygen advantage, then go into breathology, the Soma breathwork. There are so many other methods now. So that was the opening for me. And I am still working. I'm still leading a small foundation that fights against child labor in agriculture. But in parallel, this passion for the healthy lifestyle, or what now called biohacking, has been so strong that I thought, all right, I'm gonna start doing something about it. I got trained as an instructor, and now actually I resigned from my job a couple of weeks ago, and I'm still working because I have to do the handover. But now this is the end of my 20-year career in international law and human rights, and next year I will start my kind of free sailing, free journey into doing what I love doing. And as you said, yes, teaching people breath work, how to manage and how to use cold and breath work to become stronger and healthier, and just how to use biohacking to also become a stronger and better version of oneself. And also coaching people about their human potential. So all of these instruments that I've been collecting, I'm now finally ready to start doing it full time, because I've been doing that in parallel, and that's a little bit exhausting sometimes, working full time and doing that. So basically I have no free time. So that's not what I teach, actually.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. You mentioned biohacking there a couple of times, and I often get asked this question, and you will know better than I do. What does biohacking actually mean? Because a lot of people will say, "Oh, biohacking is a really bad word." So how would you succinctly, if you can, explain biohacking, or what a biohacker does?
The word biohacking is, it's about kind of hacking your biology, physiology, and psychology. But why does the word hacking have to be there? It kind of came from the Silicon Valley, and I mean the man who popularized it, who takes kind of ownership for saying, well, I coined this term and I am the father of biohacking, is Dave Asprey. He's a wonderful man. I mean, he's done a lot of work in this field. But if we don't attach ourselves to that term or to Dave, it's really about optimizing your health, your life, your performance. It's not just about healthy lifestyle, because it's much broader than that. And I meet in my, I think now about 5-year journey with biohacking, I've met biohackers at a very wide spectrum. There are biohackers who live in the forest, and then they are walking barefoot, and all they do is just very much ancestral lifestyle. And then there is another end of the spectrum where biohackers are really, really very much into kind of integrating technology, sometimes even into their bodies, and using lots of gadgets to measure themselves, doing all these N1 experiments, taking lots of supplements, and really doing the real hacking stuff. So I think I myself get somewhere in the middle. I like to be as close to the ancestral living as possible, but I'm a modern woman. I mean, we live in the modern world. It's really difficult if we all went to live in the forest. There are no enough forests for everyone, unfortunately. And for me, the word hacking really, the difference between the healthy lifestyle and the hacking is just that you get to achieve certain results in a faster way, because you are using technology, you are using science to better understand how the body works, how we interact with the environment. And you really want to live, kind of get the most out of life without kind of accelerating your journey towards the grave, as you'd say. I think the biohacking is kind of very well used by type I performers, type I personality people who have to manage multiple projects. They really need to hack their time. They really need to hack their performance and to hack everything around them, because they just have so much. But you can also be a biohacker without having this very high-end lifestyle. You can still kind of experiment on yourself, because before I could call myself a biohacker, I've spent almost 8 years testing all kinds of nutrition modalities for myself. I've done ketogenic diet, just low carb. I've done fasting, prolonged fasting, water fast. I've done all kinds of detoxes and everything. So, and by the time I was like, oh yeah, this is biohacking, I've already tried and tested everything that doesn't work for me, and I found what works. So I call this biohacking because I was doing my own N1 experiments. Same is with sleep, same is with the movement. We all have to try. There's no one size that fits all. And that's really about biohacking. You really have to hack your own biology and to see what really works for you.
I think that's a really important point, because I think often sometimes when you think of biohacking, it's almost like a quick fix, and then you end up with that idea of that there are quick fixes to things, whereas it's not the case. It's just almost like a clearer path, or a way of utilizing things that are out there to help him, as you say, improve your life. But as you say there, you've got to test stuff out. It's not just about, all right, I can do that and don't have to worry about anything else.
And for me, biohacking is really ultimately about taking responsibility for your own health and well-being. Because the difference here is that a lot of people still rely heavily on the mainstream medicine. Say, well, it's not my responsibility. I'm going to go to the doctor and the doctor tell me what to do. I don't have to take responsibility for, adjusting my lifestyle. And for me, the biohacking really starts there, when we take responsibility for our lives, for our health. And then, you go to a doctor still, but then you go and you read, you do your own reading, you do your own research, you do your own understanding. So I was once given a diagnosis of an asthma. I was like, oh, okay, well, you had a sister who suffered asthma. Okay, well, you've got asthma. And the doctor was very kind of experienced. He was pre-retirement in a Swiss kind of healthcare setting. And I thought, how come? How can you just give me a diagnosis of asthma? And he prescribed me the steroid inhaler. And this biohacking mindset that I had is, no, I'm not just going to go straight out of his office to buy an inhaler. I'm going to go and study and examine. And at that time, I didn't call myself biohacker. I didn't really know about biohacking, but that was already enough for me to say, wait a minute. No. So I think this is where it starts. And the same with the breath work, with the movement. It's not that because everybody says, well, you just have to go and do 1 hour cardio every day, or you have to do, the way everybody trains that will fit you, or everybody says you should meditate and you should just try to meditate and the hell out of yourself. But again, it's really about informing yourself and then knowing what's out there and testing it on you, and always saying, okay, so that fits for me, that doesn't fit for me.
No, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. Just going back to your training. So the first training was your Wim Hof practice, your Wim Hof training. What and also that first experience with breath, which is more like the holotropic breath work, which I've never done to that extent. I'd be interested to know what triggered you with that first sort of experience with Wim Hof, that first experience with the holotropic style breathing, that made a big difference to you to go, this is where I want to put my energies into developing more breath work and the human potential and stuff. So what exactly was the seed that got things in your mind working?
There was just seeing immediate effects. With breath work, you can see immediate effects. And then you also have a cumulative effect with regular practice. And it was just absolutely, I'm just speaking, I have goosebumps because you don't realize that until you experience it. And you just have to make that neural connection in your brain, that when the way you breathe affects the way you feel. And when I had that realization, oh my God, if I just breathe that way, that's how I feel, and that's immediate, it's always with me. I don't have to go and buy it somewhere every time. It's always in my pocket. Nobody can take it away. And once you learn it, it's a life-changing realization that it's such a powerful tool that's always with you. And yeah, for me, exactly, like just knowing that this is so powerful, I really wanted to share it with as many people as I know. And because also I'm coming from the former Soviet Union background and I speak Russian, and I know this information is not yet fully available in Russian. So I kind of felt that responsibility, being the ambassador, the translator of all of this knowledge for my people. And yeah, that I think that wasn't a difficult the trigger was really quick, and it immediately started rolling all of those kind of processes of how else I can compound it with other techniques and methods. And I immediately also saw the interrelation and interconnection of all of them, how they can be used together.
So again, that's great, the immediate effect. So Wim Hof, that holotropic style breathing, a very active breath work, very, you could say maybe aggressive, maybe that's the wrong word to use. Can I ask you, what were the immediate effects that you got from those methods then?
It's just that mental clarity. It has, I think because you hyperventilate and it's so uncomfortable and you have to consciously push yourself, your mental chatter, your monkey mind just stops. Because it's not a relaxing breathing, it's an unpleasant breathing. As I said, for me, it's just my whole nasal cavity was just in pain because it's yeah, you're losing so much CO2, and it becomes, you also breathe through them, you exhale through the mouth, and then you don't manage to condition the air in your nasal cavity just so much, so intense, and you have to keep doing it. So the immediate effect that your mental chatter stops. And I wasn't practicing any meditation at that time. I didn't have any meditative or mindfulness practices going on. At the same time, you feel physically that you're immediately energized. Without needing to take loads of coffee or any other stimulants, you immediately feel, oh, okay, I'm awake, buzzing. And with the Wim Hof method, also immediately the effect of allergy, the spring allergies, because I don't regularly suffer from spring allergies, but just kind of comes. Some year it comes, and other years it doesn't come. And then the year when it came, when I already knew the Wim Hof, I just had to breathe twice, and it never came back. And it's powerful. So because you have that kind of fight or flight, and the adrenaline spike that is very, very important because of the breath hold and all of that. So that's enough. You don't have to inject your EpiPen. You don't have to take antihistamines. It's just gone, because it has that immune modulating effect. And of course, this mind altering or consciousness altering effect, of course, is like you get to live those states of consciousness that you wouldn't be able to unless you take drugs or LSD, or you smoke weed or so.
And you mentioned as well that a lot of people have come from Wim Hof then into oxygen advantage. And I get asked this question all the time, I'm sure you do. What is the difference between oxygen advantage and the Wim Hof method, or any of the other more obvious sort of like breath work methods? How would you how would you explain the difference between the methods?
Yeah. Many people tell me that it just sounds like they're completely contradictory. And I say, oh, no, they're actually complementary, because, what Wim Hof method can achieve in terms of the Bohr effect, the higher oxygenation, is what the oxygen advantage could do much faster in a simpler way, without having to do that long hyperventilation, long breath holds. However, for example, that the release of adrenaline and that sort of the alkalinization of the respiratory alkalosis that could be achieved with the Wim Hof method is, it requires sort of this hyperventilation. And then again, the alternate state of consciousness can only be achieved through this very intense breath work, rather than kind of the LSD light, slow, deep breath of oxygen advantage. So it's just about knowing the objective for each breath work, for each method. What do you want out of it, and what your needs are, so that you can adapt. So of course, I don't practice breath work, Wim Hof method every day. It was a time when I practiced it. I was a very devout Wim Hof method practitioner, but then I got to a point where I'd start having tachycardia out of nowhere, just sitting quietly. And then, bam, my head would start racing. I was able to connect that to my Wim Hof hyperventilation and kind of those breath holds. And as soon as I stopped practicing that, my condition went back to normal. So I realized that no. If you don't have an acute kind of chronic condition in which the Wim Hof method breath work is absolutely a lifesaver, if you're in general in a good condition, your daily breath work, kind of your daily default breath work, should be the oxygen advantage type of breath work. It's your functional breathing that you should be working on. And actually, I know that it's an instrument that I have in my pocket. If I have a starting cold, if I know I'm coming down with something, I do the Wim Hof breath work, it's gone. If I again have that allergy, I do it, it's gone. If I need to just energize myself, I do a bit of the Wim Hof method, or just a simple Kapalabhati, or kind of the albatross breathing. That's from the breathology. So it's just all of these tools that you need to understand very well what they are for. You don't need to be practicing them all the time at the same time. It's just not possible.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, is like you wouldn't be hyperventilating you wouldn't be breathing Wim Hof method all day long, because you couldn't, you'd be on the floor. And as you say, just that the OA method is just how we breathe optimally in everyday life. And then obviously with the breath holds and stuff, you get in a little bit of the hormetic stress.
Yeah.
But as you say, with the Wim Hof, then you can actually go further with that. We will open it up to questions. We will have a Q&A session as we get towards the end, and we will find out about your climb to Mount Kilimanjaro. But just briefly before we get onto that, and finding out what methods you used and what sort of like training program you did for that. Breathology. Is it breathology or breathology? How do you
Breathology.
Breathology, because it's got an E in it.
Yeah.
Can you just explain a little bit about that breathing method or technique?
So the author of this method is Stig Severinsen. He's a well-renowned free diver. He's got loads of, I don't even know how many world records in free diving and static apnea. And he's kind of got all of his years of training as a free diver and package it with some ancient knowledge of the yogic breathing. And I think how his method is different from the oxygen advantage or the Wim Hof method is that it really focuses on that type of free diving, static apnea breath holds. And the breath holds would be rather on an inhale than an exhale. So he also teaches you how to expand the lung volume. There's specific exercise also for athletes. They are very similar in the sense with the oxygen advantage for athletes, but it's simply a little bit different in kind of more coming from the angle of the free diving. So for me, ultimately, it's just nice to be able to have as many kind of angles and approaches to breath work. So I know how it gives me freedom to adapt to the needs of each client. And then of course, the more techniques, the more approaches, the more you can really tailor it to individual needs. And my husband, for example, he trains as a free diver. He's just an aquaman. He loves everything related to the water. I think if he could, he would live in the water. So he's done, scuba diving, sailing, and now he's taken up free diving. And that's something that he absolutely loves. On also, there's some even physical exercises on helping kind of open up better your rib cage and really have your lungs kind of that, I would say, strength training for lungs kind of exercises. So that's also quite interesting.
I think that's an important point in terms of like rib cage and lungs, because again, we talk about lung capacity, but if you haven't got the space in your rib cage, then how can you increase your lung capacity? So I think that's really important. A lot of the qigong stuff that I practice and everything is a lot to do with upper body work, to actually free up the space in the rib cage to actually allow optimal breathing. And I like the point you make there. I think that's really important. Again, the point you're making about using these different methodologies, these different techniques, so you can be really looking at what the client needs. I was talking about this with a friend this morning. Is if you just teach one method and say this is the only method, this is breath work, then you can't be creative. You want to open up yourself to be creative and, as you say, explore different ways of doing things. And the more of these practices and methods you've got in your toolbox, the better. Human potential coach. What is a human potential coach?
Well, in maybe just a couple of words, it's the life coaching combined with biohacking. So it is really a lot more about coaching the person to understand their own potential, what they're capable of, with some biohacking tools. And usually coaching is different from, say, consulting, in the way that you don't give people the tools. You don't tell them you have to do these. You help them find their own solutions. You help them discover their own potential, and most importantly, believe in themselves. So, like, sometimes people say, well, I'm a nutritionist coach, or I'm like a trainer, physical trainer. This is very different. You're actually teaching people, okay, that's how you train, that's how you do your plank. That's how you collect your carbs, fats, and proteins. But life coaching is actually the opposite. You helping the person to dig deep into their own life, and then you say, oh well, you might want to try these tools, but again, it's up for you. It's up to you. And that's also very helpful to me, because when I get people coming to me and say, oh, I want to master my breath work, or I want to do this and that. And by the way, I also trained as a hypnotherapist. So that's another tool that I use, because when people come to me and say, I want to do this and that, I say, why? And we go deep first. Why do you want that? Because when you understand what drives the person to want to do something, that actually gives, when they understand it, not you, but when they most importantly understand it, they're much better. They're much more prepared to own any outcomes. They're much better to own what they then have to carry on after the coaching, because ultimately you don't want to create that dependency. I don't want people to depend on me. I want to give them all the tools and have them really want to continue doing that after the coaching is over. So that's where, that whole mosaic of the different tools that I use.
Yeah, again, it's similar to a conversation I was having this morning. Exactly what you're saying there. It's great stuff. It's empowering. I know empowering is a word that's used a lot, but it's giving people the knowledge, and then letting them discover and find what works for them, and enjoying what they're doing. And like you, it's like, always ask why. Why am I doing this exercise? Why am I doing this breathing method? Why am I training for a marathon? It's really, really good stuff.
Yeah.
Right. What inspired you to decide to climb Mount Kilimanjaro?
Well, again,
why did you do it? Why?
yeah, that's good question. I mean, just first of all, I was again Wim Hof. I saw he climbed the mountain in shorts and in very record time, and I also thought, wow, that'd be great to do one day. And then I joined. Well, that was a long time ago. I think he did an expedition early 2020, but the tickets got sold out so quickly, and the price at that time was very high for me, so I didn't do it. And then late last year, I joined a business club and that is kind of for the Russian speakers, the former Soviet Union business and entrepreneurs. And because I want to transition from the being employed to doing my own business, I thought, well, it would be great to get that exposure and networking and connections. And that business club that's run by a former billionaire who is from Kazakhstan, but is now kind of that he lost many billions, and then he just kind of established himself, and now he's gone into all this teaching and sharing his experiences. He's an extremely wise man. He's got lots to share, and he's really bringing a lot of very not just any entrepreneurs. He's bringing around him entrepreneurs interested in self-development. And that's why I joined the club. It's not just about business. It's about really developing yourself. And then once you develop yourself, your business will develop too. And his kind of main message is about the Kaizen planning and Ikigai. Ikigai is your mission in Japanese. So he really talks about that when you want your business to be successful, you have to understand what your personal mission is and what your business's mission is. So as part of that club, they run different travels. And they do different like buggy tours or something. And then, well, Kilimanjaro came up. And when I saw it, I thought like, oh, that'd be great. But then the dates aren't probably going to work for me because it was late January and I'm being still employed. I thought, I don't know if I have enough vacation days to go. So I didn't immediately agree. And then and I thought, but I can help you guys. I said, well, I've got all the tools. So those who are going to climb, let me coach you, let me share you the techniques, how to breathe correctly. So I gave them a free webinar and I shared some tools. And then I thought, but why don't you go yourself? What stops you?
You're doing all the work, go.
Exactly. So I thought, well, actually the dates aren't too bad. And if I plan it now, maybe I'll just have to plan around those dates. So I signed up. And then, and that was just, I think for me, it wasn't just because I saw Wim Hof doing it, but because I also started my own life mission started kind of shaping up. I started also seeing what it is that I really am I'm supposed to be doing in this life, or when I grow up, what's my life all about? And then I thought, well, that would be a great challenge. And because I already knew I would be transitioning from employment to this kind of that freedom sailing, whatever how you call it, I thought I need some kind of a rite of passage. I need something where I would say, well, I've climbed the mount, be it Kilimanjaro or some inner mountain, as Wim Hof says, it's your inner mountain. And then that would be that symbolic sort of separation, closing one chapter of my life and opening the other. And because that club, it's called Kaizen Club, the Kaizen Club, every travel that they make, they always give it some sort of they qualify it, like, okay, this travel is about realization, or this travel is about being reborn, or that travel is about overcoming yourself. So the Kilimanjaro travel was about overcoming yourself. It is, like both literally and figuratively. So I did that. The thing is, maybe I should, if we have time, I wanted to just take a step back and give the context for how this travel happened, because it wasn't just, I signed up and I went. We had a lot of, we had some events happening in Almaty in early January. So I was in Kazakhstan with my family. I usually go on kind of the New Year's and Christmas. And we had very violent demonstrations all over the country. And these were so violent that we had the government declares the state of emergency, and the whole country was in lockdown for a week. We had no internet for a week. We couldn't communicate with the external world. My husband couldn't even call me. Not always he could get through even. We didn't know what was actually happening. They opened some television channels. These television channels, some of them were also destroyed. The airport was attacked and also partially destroyed. So I couldn't even depart Almaty on time. So the whole country was in shock. And I was supposed to fly back on the 11th, and then I only flew back on the 14th. The travel was scheduled for the 20th of January. But because a lot of people were so traumatized, still, even though it's for the former Soviet Union, the big bulk of entrepreneurs come from Kazakhstan. And many people just didn't feel right. We just, we are not prepared to go climb Kilimanjaro. So they offered another slot. There were some people who were ready. There were like seven people, but then the big bulk, 40 people, went in a month later. So as we got to Kilimanjaro on the 18th of February, this is when also there was started this acceleration between Russia and Ukraine. And the day of the summit is when the Ukraine war started, the day of the summit. So all of these kind of, again, I'm speaking, I have goosebumps. It's just amazing how this whole climb had so much symbolism in it for me. And there were Ukrainians and Russians with us in the group. So there were 3 Ukrainians that were part of our smaller group that they couldn't go back to Kiev. And I was helping the 2 of them to buy new tickets. One of them went back to Warsaw. Another one went to Almaty. And I was helping them to buy those tickets online because their flights were canceled, of course. So the climb wasn't really just about your physical overcoming. It was also about this unity, because we were, mostly, of course, Russian was the language that united us. But we were from all parts of the world. And the Russians, the Ukrainians were there. It was tense a little bit. There was a group that was kind of similar to, it was not part of the entrepreneur group, but was a parallel group. But the Russians that were part of our group and the Ukrainians, they just didn't, they didn't let the political events affect the way they were going through. So somehow it's just that this climb really had just got so many meanings. And for me, of course, when I did that, I thought, okay, for me, it's being reborn. It's kind of starting a new life, because indeed, I'm going to start a new life from zero. I have never been an entrepreneur before. I've never worked as a freelance before. I've always worked in employment. So that's why. Sorry, it's a bit of a long answer on why, but it's a big why.
No, I mean, like you say, that whole why makes a complete difference to the experience that you have. So that's obviously a major part of the experience that you have doing that climb. So how many was in the team, did you say, as the team that you went with?
Yeah, we were about 40, and 6 of us were women. So these were entrepreneurs from all over the world. But, you know, when you go to Kilimanjaro, it's not just, I would say we don't always give that recognition to all of the porters and the assistants that are with us. It's like when you may have seen this 14 Peaks with Nims de Purja, and he says, it's my mission to also, bring into light all of the Sherpas that are helping people to climb. So it's like, yeah, you climb, but you had all these Sherpas bringing the bags for you. So it's the same that whenever I talk about Kilimanjaro, I say, yes, we were 40, but there were about 100 or more porters and cooks and all these Tanzanians who made it possible. We really only carried backpacks of 15 at most, no, 10 kgs, 8 to 10 kgs. And even if there were people who said, okay, I'm going to hire a porter to carry my backpack. It's like, okay, well, that's cheating. Come on. But yeah, anyway, everybody climbed, and we were all different ages, 6 women, and people who have never done any physical exercise before. They were, of course, the ones who suffered the most. But also, it wasn't just, okay, in 2 months, we're going to climb Kili, do nothing. There was also the club organized a whole series of preps. They made an agreement with a gym in Almaty. People could go into the gym. There were trainers who would organize trainings. And now, of course, as soon as it was confirmed, I was giving my tips and the exercises. And there were people who were serious about it. They did practice. They did teach themselves to breathe through the nose only while going uphill or training, and then they practice the kind of light breathing and then the high altitude simulation exercises. But there were very few. Most people didn't even watch the webinar that I did, and then they were the ones who didn't watch and didn't do anything. They were the ones who suffered the most.
So that shows again that the techniques that you were using work. So just explain, if you can, the sort of like your standard training that you did in terms of breath work for the climb. What were the exercises that you maybe did on a daily basis?
Well, also, to be very honest, because of all that background of the political conditions, my mental state wasn't in an optimal state. So I think I didn't prepare as much as I would have liked to prepare. I didn't do the actual climbs because I live in Switzerland. We've got lots of mountains, and even in Kazakhstan, I did only 2 climbs up to 3,500. Again, I think it wasn't, I could have done more, because I'm someone who is generally all very active and I like to prepare. I didn't do, I think, I only probably did half of what I could have done. But before everything happened, yes, of course, I was doing the light breathing exercises. I did a couple of times the high altitude simulation, although I'm not very good. For me, it's a very, very stressful exercise. I have some mental resistance with that exercise. But whatever I could do is just climbing with the mouth shut. So whenever I would go to the mountains, nasal breathing all the time. Just doing the kind of the walking light breathing as well, and sometimes I even used a breathing trainer. But again, that's something that you put in the mouth. I have a couple of them. I always felt that it was just a little way too much, because I felt that sometimes simply breathing through the nose was enough already. You are going especially uphill, and we always try to look for some good uphill. And I think just that, and of course the biomechanical, biochemical light breathing was enough to also recover. And when I would feel exhausted, is the recovery position where you again do diaphragmatic breathing. Sometimes I would use with like the elastic band walking at home, so I could increase my lung capacity and strengthen the diaphragm. But other than that, and then some also use my not very regular at that time, irregular cross training, also always with my mouth shut, only nose breathing. This was what I did. And I didn't have I would say maybe only on one occasion I had a slight kind of pain, but that just lasted maybe a few minutes and it was gone. But I didn't have any other high altitude sickness, high mountain altitude sickness symptoms. I mean, of course, that was compounded a little bit by the lack of sleep, because we were sleeping in tents, in pairs, and sometimes the tent wouldn't be flat, it would be like this, so you're constantly sliding down. So out of 5 nights in a tent, I think I only slept 4. Like, I only slept once.
Right.
The 4 nights I didn't sleep. So, and the night that I slept was after the summit, just after everything was done.
That's relief, I would think.
Yeah. So it was also one of the lady with who I was sharing the tent. She was from Ukraine, so she left a little early towards the hotel because she was hoping maybe she could return. So I also slept alone. And then, of course, I could sleep finally. But for 4 nights, I couldn't sleep. So I was that also exhaustion. Despite all of that, I mean, we walked in total 75 kilometers going there and coming back. And I think just that kind of, in my view, the training that is kind of just the basic training, nothing too fancy, was already enough. And of course, the months, almost more than a year of my own working on improving my functional breathing. But even then, just to say, like you said, there was some even immediate effects when participants who weren't practicing that, but simply followed my advice when we got there and said, you guys just breathe slowly. If you have to open the mouth, you have to slow down. You have to go at the pace of your ability to breathe through the nose. If you start going faster, but you have to breathe through the nose, that means you're going too fast. So when they adopted that, or when they had to do that recovery breathing, like the light breathing, the biomechanical part of it, they also felt the improvement. And of course, most importantly, the deep breathing was very, very critical to them, especially at as the day of the summit, the night of the summit. Actually, we left at midnight and we got there at 6 a.m. And it was quite a steep climb. And this is already at the altitude of 5,000, because at the 5,000, the amount of oxygen in the air is half the amount of oxygen at the ground level. So you already, whatever you're doing, you already don't have enough oxygen in the air. So when people adopted the deep, slow and deep breathing, they really felt that just gave them additional strength. And then, of course, the guides were always saying, "Pole, pole, you don't go fast." And that was actually very, very powerful, because some of us who were in good shape, I felt like I could go faster, but he would always not let me, like, you have to follow the guide. You don't go in front of the guide, you go behind the guide. And the guide went really, really slow. So that, of course, helped with that oxygenation and then slowing down the rate of the breathing.
That's brilliant to, like you say, that whole idea of just the very basics of nasal breathing and breathing through the nose and not getting out of control of the breath. And I think that's great to hear that foundation really made a difference that you did. And the other interesting thing you say there, I'm just going back to what you said about when I asked you why holotropic breathing, Wim Hof, got you excited about breathwork, and you were talking there about the immediate effects, because it's a very obvious immediate effect if you're hyperventilating. But I'm really pleased what you said there about you gave the guides or the other people within the group there the idea of breathe through the nose, and they got that immediate effect there just from light nasal breathing. So it doesn't have to be this big awakening or this big emotional effect. Just that immediate effect from nasal breathing, I think is brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And exactly, people noticed that as soon as they were just simply adapting the speed of movement towards the breathing. And so the breath has to be your guide. It's not the movement it's not the breathing that has to catch up with the movement. It's the movement that has to catch up with the way you breathe.
Perfect. And that, like you say, that really highlights it when you're climbing up a mountain with low oxygen. But it's the same when you're walking or when you're running or when you're doing any type of exercise. If you have that principle in mind, you can't go wrong, really, hopefully, unless you fall over something. And just to like when you said about like the high altitude training, those stronger breath holds, then like you say, you have that mental block of it. We should have that mental block because you're building up CO2, and CO2 creates fear. So, and if you
Yeah.
don't have that mental fear with doing those exercises, then you're not doing those exercises. So I like that point you make there as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. We've chatted a lot. We've chatted for almost an hour, actually. That's gone really quickly. I just want to open it up for any questions because has there anybody put anything in the chat? No, everybody's been glued to their screens. Does anybody have any questions? You can ask a question in the chat or just put your hand up, use the reaction button, or just unmute yourself and ask questions or any comments or thoughts. Everybody's quiet. No questions? There must be.
I probably scrolled too
I
much.
knew Tom would ask a question. Tom's waving.
Well, it's not a question, but since it's just a little story, since nobody's saying anything else. The Kilimanjaro bit was interesting because recently my wife, following one of her sons, signed up to a virtual walk. As in, you walk locally, but you log yourself online. And one of these was Kilimanjaro.
Wow.
So there's lots of problems she didn't have, like altitude, lack of oxygen, and whatever. But it's also, it was interesting hearing the wee extras about the porters and so on, because I think, it was interesting seeing the maps that they gave as to where things actually were, the route, and so on was actually quite fascinating and reminds you of how much you don't know about our world. So it was quite interesting to hear of real life. So one very simple question, was it what I would call a very circuitous route to get up Kilimanjaro?
There are many different routes to get up to the summit. We took what's called the Rongai route. It's kind of, I would say, the most scenic because it goes through 5 different climatic zones. So we started from a tropical forest. And then we, as you go up, there's less and less vegetation. And, at some point, it was like a Martian-like looking landscape. So it was beautiful. And we didn't have to do a lot of up and down to acclimatize. So it was a very gradual ascent. Only on one day, I think we just kind of went a little bit higher, but just only 100 meters. But that was already from the base camp and then back down. So this is the route that I appreciated the most because I always like someone who is that I have a bit of that type A personality. Like I just can't stand going up and down. So that route was really, really the most pleasant one where you just gradually gain altitude. But then, of course, the descent, when we talk about the ascent, it's always important to talk about the descent because it's not enough to climb up. You have to also have enough strength to go down in dignity. And because the night of the summit, so yeah, we summited overnight. We saw the sunrise up at the peak, Uhuru Peak. Uhuru means freedom. And then the very painful descent of about 2.5, 3 hours. There are also these kind of, on that side of the mount where you descend through to our base camp, not other base camps, they have a lot of what it's called, I don't know the English word for it, but it's kind of sand-like soil where you could just kind of speed up your climbing when you are sort of running as if you are snowboarding on your feet. I can't really explain. So that sped up a little bit, the descent. But I personally, my knees, I have that kind of iliotibial irritation, band irritation sometimes. So descending for me is much more painful. But I was wearing the knee holder, so that was good. But it was a very painful descent because the sun was blasting. It was kind of a little foggy for most of the days, but then the morning of the descent, it was the sun blasting. So if you weren't wearing a sunscreen, there were people who really got burnt and they had blisters on their face because of that exposure. Yeah, they were like all completely destroyed lips and noses. It was horrendous. I was fortunate. I mean, I knew that I have to take care of my skin, so I had enough sunscreen. But the descent was really, really painful. And people who had already reached the summit exhausted, they, of course, some of them, I think one person had to be taken down with on the carriers. So yeah, when we talk about the ascent, we always have to have enough battery in us to also go back. Yeah, and that, of course, the breathing, the functional breathing is what gives you that, keeps your fuel in the tank all the time.
Pacing yourself.
I think that ties in with what you were saying a few weeks ago, Gray, about in testing it, is people who are walking downstairs actually gained more fitness, strength, or whatever than the ones who were walking
Yes, yeah, that
upstairs.
study of actually that eccentric contraction of going downhill or going down the stairs was better for you than going up, and it can be tougher as well.
Yeah.
It's also a kind of traditional thing. If you're climbing a hill, you sort of, oh, this is hard work. I can't wait till we're going back down. And then when you're back down, you say, actually, this is
It was
worth
easier
it.
going up.
Thank you
You
very
could
much.
just get a cab back down, I think, or parachute down. Christine has got her hand up. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Karima. Thank you for a really fascinating conversation. We have quite a lot in common, actually, because I worked for many years in international human rights, and I lived in Colombia for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't cross at the same time, but yeah, quite interesting.
Lovely.
And I also work as a coach, but there you go. A leadership coach. Yeah.
Lovely.
But I have a question for you about, I think I know the answer because the way you've been talking is, were you able to nasal breathe all the way to the top? Were you just slowed down, so you made it all the way? Yeah, I thought that was the implication. Amazing.
Yeah. My only, I would say, difficulty was with, for some reason, my calves. I felt a lot of pain in my calves because that part of the mount in the route that we chose in the ascent is really just like that. There weren't any rocks. Like when you ascend and you step rocks, but your foot is in a constant position like that. So my calves were under a lot of tension, which because of our gradual ascent to the previous days, we didn't notice very much because also there were lots of rocks and it was kind of nice. You got to use all of your legs muscles. But the ascent was just that annoying steep way where your calf is constantly under tension. And I really felt a lot of pain, that physical pain in the legs from just being in that very comfortable position for hours, because it took us 6.5 hours nonstop. And we really only stopped for just 3, maximum 5 minutes breaks to get some glucose on, drink some tea, because it also takes a while. You need to take your gloves off. You need to get your thermos and just sipping, and then you're let's go, because you also don't want to lose your body temperature because it was so cold. It was like at the summit was -20. As we were climbing up, was snowing, was really, really cold. So you didn't want to lose that because you were already at some point sweating. And in 6.5 hours, stopping maybe every hour or so, which is for 3, 4, 5 minutes, it's quite strenuous. So for me, it was just the beginning of the ascent. By the time my muscles got adapted, so I think it was maybe 2, 3 hours in, I finally stopped feeling that pain, and they got warmed up enough. They got adapted to that incline, very uncomfortable incline.
Great, thank you. And I have another question. You talked about having a mental block about the high altitude simulation work.
Yeah,
I'd just be interested to hear more about that and what you've done to overcome that, or why you think you have a mental block, or perhaps you don't know because you've got one. I'm just interested to explore that a bit more.
Yeah, I just have generally, I have a big mental block on breath hold. It's my personal, because I had once an incident of being a child. I almost drowned. So I have I think that trauma. And I haven't yet, being a hypnotherapist or hypnotist myself, I haven't yet gotten around to solving that issue. But it's that breath holding on empty lungs that I have a problem with. So be it high altitude simulation training, where you inhale, exhale, normal breath in, normal breath out, you pinch your nose and you start walking, and you accelerate and you push, and that's, you really stretch that kind of breath hold as much as possible. And then I think it's not just the physiological response, I also get that kind of psychological response from that incident. Every time I also measure my BOLT score, I think I don't do well enough because of the psychological. So if I have my functional breathing, I think I have a perfect functional breathing, but my BOLT score isn't always reflective of that because of my psychological background on breath holds. So even as an OA coach myself, it's still a journey for me. I still haven't mastered it myself.
But we have to remember, again, we're just chipping in here, is that's normal, because we should have a fear response to the buildup of CO2 because that's what keeps us alive. So everybody, when they do normal breath in, normal breath out, straight away carbon dioxide is building up, and that's what signals to the body, if you don't breathe, it's not going to be long before you die. So we do fear that buildup of carbon dioxide. So that's that psychological response to a breath hold shows that you're doing it right, and that will always be the case when you go for a strong breath hold. When you're doing a light breath hold, say we're just doing like that 5-second normal breath in, normal breath out, just have that little pause at the bottom of the breath, that should feel calming. But remember, when we're doing a stronger breath hold, it's deliberately stressing the body. So it's going back to what Karima said, is about, why are we doing this exercise? What is the intention of this exercise? And the intention of a breath hold, strong breath hold, is to create fear. But it'll create fear, but at the same time, you're getting those physiological benefits from it.
But just before I see Andrew, just to comment also as an OA instructor, it's something that I'm always aware of, that when we take a BOLT score and we try to determine whether the person has dysfunctional or functional breathing, I just know that my own BOLT score doesn't also reflect my own functional breathing. So it is right, absolutely. It should create that, but it's sometimes that psychological piece where, because we teach ourselves to calm down through breathing, and you can't calm when you have to hold your breath. So it's counterintuitive.
But again, just going a little bit deeper on the OA stuff, this is one of the things we're working with, whether I'm working with a lot of the coaches, that a lot of people get hung up on the BOLT score, and you can see it in the Facebook groups and everything, but it's like, take other things into consideration as well, as you know, from an OA coach. Andrew, Andrew's got his
thank you
raised, and thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Christine.
Andrew, sir.
Thanks so much, Karima, and great, yeah, really good. I'm actually by chance helping a friend out who's going to Everest Base Camp, so this is very timely. and you've actually confirmed that I'm on the right track, so which is good. Yeah, I don't think I'll go to high altitude training sessions with him, but what I've started with is just with your 4-hour walks, just do nasal breathing. And he did it the other day for 95% of it. And he said, yeah, definitely noticed a difference. And I'm in Melbourne, Australia, so we're at sea level on the flat. But I might get him to do some breathe light or some sipping, a little bit of sipping as he goes and progresses. So thank you. Excellent. It sounds like, Karima, you might have a stress signature potentially with that BOLT score issue. I guess we're all different and we all have different reactions. I went to do my free diving, and I'm from the country, farming, so it's very foreign to me. And you have to hit 10 meters to get your paddy open water, and I couldn't get there. And it was over 2 days. And your wetsuit and your fins, and actually I really found the mouth breathing, because they breathe up through a snorkel. Mouth breathing, and I'm so used to nasal breathing, and I found it dried my mouth out, really foreign, unsettling. Anyway, I think I learned more not getting that accreditation than I did getting it. Almost.
Interesting.
But yeah, could you move to a maximum exhale test if you wanted to test your breathing?
Yeah, I've done that too. I think that's that probably is, yeah. Sometimes it's. I think it's just the preparation, the mental preparation for the test that also counts for me.
Mm.
And I've seen just such despairing results every time, and it's. But I think, yeah, for me, as that climb to Mount Kilimanjaro was a test in its own. And I thought I really was also, the other part of the why is that I wanted to see, okay, will that all pay off? And because I did that, I thought, okay, so my BOLT score isn't reflective of my ability to tolerate higher amounts of CO2, and not just my, my chemoreceptors are in good place.
Yeah. So, when I didn't get through on my freediving, I reflected on that, and there were probably people in that group who were amazing. They could go to 20 meters, 25 meters, no problem. But if you put them in front of a group of people to do public speaking, or you put them in a situation where they had to facilitate conflict, then it would be really interesting to see what their stress response would be when it comes to CO2. So we're all very different, I think.
Yeah, wonderful. It's great that you say that, Andrew. Yeah, because I've been doing, started through the beginning of the pandemic, and since then I haven't stopped doing online. And the first session I did online was terrifying, and now it's just something that's second nature. Absolutely. And by the way, I did the French certification, the first level of diving, scuba diving. That was 10 years ago. I did it, but I never practiced it. So it's it's like, okay, done it, all right, done enough. But yeah, that was also a nice experience.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. Anybody else? Christine has just meant to say the term for coming down a mountain like you described is scree sliding, at least in the UK. Scree sliding.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Okay, I'll note that. Scree sliding.
Never heard
I wouldn't
of
even know the Russian name for it. I have no idea. It's just
Let's have a practice of that. Let's find a hill and go scree sliding. Excellent. Any other questions? We've gone over by about 10 minutes, but it's been fascinating to get the questions and to hear all of the story. Anybody else got any questions? No? If people want any more information from you, now you're teaching full time and you're doing Zooms and stuff. So if anybody wanted to get in contact with you, Karima, what would be the best way to do that? Or maybe you don't want anybody to get in contact with you.
No, not at all. And the only thing is that I'm not doing it yet full time because I'm still in the handing over mode for a few more months. So I'm still not yet doing that. I'm still sacrificing my free time for that. But absolutely, the only reason is that my social media is Russian speaking because that's where I focus. But I'll start doing picking that English, French, or Spanish speaking side of it at some point. But you can always write to me on my Instagram, even though you don't probably understand much, but there's the right button. So it's Karima_JAM1. So it's at Karima_jam1. That's my main sort of activity, even though you won't be able to see the text, but you'll see what I'm doing. I'm constantly posting stuff, and like now I'm talking about how to better tolerate heat, because the many people who I'm talking to, they are now in like 35-40 degrees heat, and they don't know how to handle it. So that's also kind of telling people how to better thermoregulate.
We've actually got a heat wave coming up this weekend in London.
Yeah.
So
same here.
You got one there as well.
Yeah, it's coming up too here.
Yeah, I think it's about 28 today, and I think at the weekend it's going to be hotter and hotter. It was hot this morning, so yeah. That was one of my favorite Instagram posts we did at the Health Optimization Summit, because I was just stood there grinning and you were talking in Russian on Instagram, and I was going,
yeah.
You've got a lot of followers, about 52,000 followers you've got on there.
Yeah, I had that account, but I decided to close it. It's also sort of part of starting everything from zero. So I closed that old account and I started a new one. Now it has about 1,000 or something. It's just I thought, okay, I need to have a clean start with everything. And I thought I'd just reset everything from zero. So yeah, it's a smaller account. It's a much cozier audience, but at least they are a lot more loyal because old account there was a lot of other audience that I don't think I need. So that's but for me it's not the numbers that count, it's the quality of the following.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not the quantity, it's the quality.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I really appreciate you joining, chatting. It's a really interesting story and great to hear how OA and all of the breathwork and everything has worked for you, Karima. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and thanks everyone for coming along. If you need any more information, then just give us a shout, you know, to get hold of Karima. But thanks for joining. Have a fantastic rest of the day and have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you so much, Gray. Thank you, everyone. Lovely for joining. Lovely seeing you all. Thank you.
Right.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Right. Thank you, Karima. Thanks, Green.
Thank you.